your sound wise. Let me know if you've got some kick drum action going. Let me know what it sounds like over there in the chat, and we'll mess around with this a little bit in a minute. Trying to get my laptop to work, and for some reason it is not connecting to Wi-Fi. So yeah, maybe we'll just skip that for today and do the chat on the phone. Got to improvise always, whether it's in your music or in your live stream. We'll be all about the improvisation today. So let's see here. Let's go to YouTube and we don't need to listen to it through the phone, but we can see the chat. There we go. Chat action right there. Cool. Put that here. If I can see it there. Should be good. All right. Looks like we've got Keith there. We've got about 12 people online. So jump into the chat. Let me know if you can hear. Let me know if everything sounds okay. Let me know where you're checking things out from. Where you at? What you doing? Welcome. So what are we going to talk about today? So I did a live set that I recorded for Rinse FM out of the UK, and I put that out last week. It's up on their site. So if you go to rinsefm.com, you can take a look at that and check out the audio there. It's on their SoundCloud. It's also on my SoundCloud. And I did a full video version of it while I recorded the live set, and I posted that up. So that's on YouTube as well, so if you want to watch. What I thought I would do, because I was getting a lot of questions from the people that were watching the YouTube version of it, they were checking out what was going on, and a bunch of people had questions about what they were seeing in the live stream. So what I wanted to do was, first of all, walk through a little bit of that. I know we walked through the rig a lot, but just talk about what I was doing at different parts of that Rinse FM set, and then answer any questions that you have. I know there was quite a bit of questions about individual pieces of gear and what was making this noise or that noise. So happy to go through those. So if you have any questions, chuck those into the chat. And otherwise, we're gonna go through it. So I guess the first question that I had more than anything else, hey, what's up, Peter, Keith, Disfaction, Amnesty, Audio Trauma, awesome. Thanks for joining. Let me know where you're joining in from, by the way. Jason, what's going on? Sick live set, thanks, glad to hear that. So first question I had, was it all improvised? Yes, it was totally improvised. So when I started out to do that set, I had no idea what I was gonna do. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anything preset, pre-planned. I had stuff that I could use. Obviously I have sounds in the live rig, and I had some loops in the black box and some one shots in the D-tact, and that was kind of it. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. The only thing that I had going as far as a plan was I wanted to, because I knew I had 2 hours, and because I knew that it wasn't a dance floor set, right? I wasn't like stepping up with a full dance floor and needed to kind of get right into it. So I wanted to take my time. So it was a bit more patient than other sets might be. So the first 10 minutes or so is a bit more ambient, kind of getting into the mood of things, then adding in a little bit of drums and percussion, and then kind of moving on from there. So yeah, it was a slow burn on purpose, and then I wanted to go through a lot of different sounds and a lot of different kind of moods and vibes. So I like to say that an improvised live set, it's kind of a window into the mind of the person doing it, because what you were seeing in that set as things happened, those were ideas that were coming up in the moment. So I would hear something, it would inspire me to do something or change something or kind of go in a certain direction. So yeah, everything was in the moment, right? Improvised. Now, because of that, we talk a lot about this rig, about this setup, because in order to be able to do that kind of stuff, you have to have something that is made for it, built for it, set up for it, whatever you want to call it. So this live rig is really built specifically for improvisation. So the modules that I choose, the way I have them kind of set up and configured and what's controlling what is really set up in a way that lends itself to improvisation and quickly taking an idea from, inspiration in my head to a sound that the listener can hear, like as quickly as possible, getting everything kind of into and out of the machines, right? And using the machines in ways to inspire some of those ideas, especially when you're recording a live set, like in a studio environment, like I did for that, where I wasn't in front of a crowd, I wasn't in a venue that kind of gives its own sort of inspiration, which is what I prefer. So in this, it has to be like you're really conversing with your machines because they're giving you ideas through kind of random things that pop up or interesting sounds that occur or interesting rhythms that happen or interesting ways that they kind of play off of one another. So I have loud static noise. That is probably this. Let me know if that made it go away. There's this one odd ground loop that I get when I stream in a certain way, and that is one of my cameras has the audio going through it. So if I have it plugged in instead of running off of battery power, it gets that. So let me know if the static noise has gone away. It should have, I hope, by that. Sweet. Yeah, sorry, normally I unplug that before I go, but I spaced out this time. So thanks. One of those things that comes up all the time is gear problems, and we'll talk about that later on if you guys want. So basically the idea, again, was to have a rig that's set up so that I can get ideas. And because I wanted to do kind of this slow burn kind of set where it would get started off slow and kind of build slowly and then go through a whole bunch of different kind of sonic ideas as they came into my head. That's what made me select the gear that I selected. So it's kind of like with modular, each piece of gear is kind of its own preset because it does its things better than other pieces of gear do those same things. So what you might have heard at the beginning of that was a bit of kind of an atmospheric, kind of a droning bit of sound, which was coming from the Noisite Warp. So that's this guy right here. So I'll bring that in. So if you notice, here, let me switch up my view here. Close this. Yeah, so we can switch to the overhead. So one thing that I did with this, just to make it kind of a little bit easier for me, is I put it on a really slow division of the clock so I could still keep everything in 16 steps and not have to have it go from screen to screen. I don't like when it jumps because sometimes I lose track of what page I'm on. So this way it was going through this. And that was kind of how I started things off. And the way I have this set up is I have this going through a couple of different sends. One of them is a reverb combo delay thing, which is the Desmodus Versio. So I can send this through that. And that'll give us some cool, interesting sounds without really changing much on the warp. But then if you start to go in and start to modify things here, and I'll switch the views so you can see that. And obviously this stuff can be modulated, but I prefer to kind of handle the modulation with my hands. So this was a bit of what you were hearing at the beginning. And that was going through one send, which is the Desmodus Versio. Then we can go through the other send, which is the ghost. So really quickly, it turns a relatively simple sound into something really interesting. So one of the things that you'll notice a lot with the sets that I do is I like to take simple ideas, whether it's simple sequences or simple initial sound sources, and then affect those in really interesting ways. So we can do a couple of other examples of that. So like, let's take, this is the BIA, which is just, here again, switch views here, just a single note. So you'll hear, and that's actually already going through an effect. I'll take the effect off so you can hear. Right? So the BIA is going through a filter and then through the effects aid. So we get a little bit of something to give that, its own kind of character and sound. But then we can start to go through the sends like what we were doing with the other one before. So we go through the dismodus here. So we can stretch that out. And then we have some control over the tone of what the dismodus is doing. And then when you have something that's percussive like that and you send it through the ghost, the other send, so you get a lot of different things, and that's all coming off that one tone. So again, if we take off all of the effects again, that's what we're starting off with. And let's do the ghost. So you see you can get some really interesting stuff just from that. And then again, adding in so when you've got something like this, just a single sound that can do some interesting stuff like that, then you can start to bring in things like kick drums. And with the boom and the boom performer, you have a side chain, which when you have long washed out sounds like this can make it really interesting. And this side chain also works even without the kick in. So if I take that out, so you can have something rhythmic, even with the single note, just from those different effects. And then something I was doing a lot in my live set as well was using the Shakmat battering ram as a supplemental kick. So basically now we've just got two kicks there and a single note from the BIA that's going through some effects, right? The BIA is cool too because it has octave jumps. So if we wanted to move to a different mood, I'll do this drastically, not the way I would do it if I was performing, but if we move down, this takes us 2 octaves down. And we can add in a little envelope to that. And then change the filter. So again, it's still just kick and one note through effects. So you can get a lot of mileage out of something like that if you're doing stuff that sounds interesting. So this is why having, take that off here. This is why having good sound sources at the beginning and having a setup that lends itself towards improvisation. So having sends, effect sends that are interesting, and rather than just being like your standard delay and reverb sends. So having something like the Ghost, for example, where you're sending it through, the Ghost is in effect an effects chain in one module. So you've got delay, reverb, filter, distortion, overdrive, compression, all in one unit. So you can mess around with those different things and come up with a lot of different sounds out of just one individual tone. So again, if we were to just play the BIA tone without anything, but then go into the Ghost, I'll take off the side chain. And by changing up the timing of the delay, and this delay is clocked, so these will all be divisions of whatever your main thing is. And then there's a bandpass filter here that can pick out interesting effects or interesting frequencies. And again, if we were to take this with a kick, and again, one note through one effect send. And then you can add in a second effect send. So again, just kick and one note. So there's a lot that you can do with just these individual sounds. So that's kind of one of the hallmarks of the sets that I like to do, is having, again, simple sequences and simple core sounds that are interesting and then have a lot of interesting harmonics. Then you can play around with those with filters, effect sends, and things like that to make something more interesting. And that's one of the ways that you can kind of make it a bit easier on yourself to be able to improvise live. Because if you have really complex melodies with complex counter melodies, with complex bass lines, with all of these things that have to work together, moving from one idea to another can be really complicated. So if you keep that simple and you keep your ideas very simple and purposeful, so they fit into the frequency spectrum where they need to, and they have the right type of rhythmic elements that they need to, it's a really easy way to move from one idea to another idea without getting yourself all tangled up with a whole bunch of other things. So let's see if there's any questions here. Let's look into the chat. Hey everybody, let's see, Keith from the UK, Disfaction from Berlin, Amnesty from France, Jason is in Paris as well, Brighton, UK, Indianapolis. Awesome, thank you guys, everybody, for joining in from all over the place. Thank you very, very much. What else do we have going on here? Warp is so amazing. Yes, it is. And that was just like one sound. We can get into a little bit more about what the warp does. Here we go. Saludos desde España. Where in España? Where are you? Let's see. UK. Add the battering ram as a secondary kick. Yeah. So what I was doing a lot before I had the boom as a kick, I was doing everything with the battering ram. And that's something that, so if we go into our switch views here so you can see the sequencer. So this, now I have the boom is on the first line and the battering ram is on the second line. So if I was to just take the battering ram and do just a 4 on the floor kick with the battering ram, one thing that I was doing before with this was I was going into the velocity, and I would do velocity changes for those things to get like more subtle kicks. I actually don't think I have the velocity patched right now. so I can't do that right now on that. But just being able to do that, to have a primary kick that's full velocity and then some like kind of ghost notes or secondary kick notes that are partial velocity. What's cool now is by having two different kicks. So now we'll go back to the first line here is the boom. So having one kick there, then I can sequence at a lower level. I can change the level on the mixer. So then I can bring in and I have a lot more control individually over that one, the secondary kick. So I can change the tone of it. And obviously change the volume in the mixer, but then I also have individual effect sends for that one as well. So let's say I wanted some reverb on that secondary kick. So I can have just that control. Or let's say I wanted that secondary kick to go through the ghost. And using the bandpass filter on the ghost, it picks up harmonics and sends those through. And so you, even though that's a kick, you're getting much higher level kind of interesting percussive sounds that come out of that, or I can bring it way down. So it's almost like it creates a percussion line just based on the division of the delay. So again, that's having that individual control just over that kick. And then with the boom, you have a whole bunch of individual control as well, because you've got, obviously this is our level here, but this also has effects. So I can filter, like DJ style filter, but then I have this groove version over here, groove module over here, which is a way to do kind of rumble-ish things, and it's got its own level. So right now, it's kind of sequenced using these level knobs to be just like an offbeat. But if I bring in one of the other taps, or I can take that tap back out again. And you see, if you're using just the tap, it becomes like just an offbeat rhythm. Or you can bring in the other tap. Or you can bring in the first tap as well. And then you can blend that tap with a reverb. Or you can just go full rhythmic reverb. Or you can go to white noise. And you've got a filter on here as well. So if you want to just filter the white noise down. And then you can also go to basically a sub. This one works better if you pitch it up, because it's kind of a static-y sub. So depending on what you're listening on, you'll hear kind of different versions of this. I kind of like the combination of reverb and drum taps, and then filter that down a bit. That for me is kind of a fun way to do that offbeat rhythmic rumble-ish thing without having it devolve into just like a cliche rumble sound. So you can give it a little bit of pump, and it does sidechain to the kick automatically. So that's why you hear it kind of ducking out of the way of the kick. And then when you bring in again, just that simple sound from the BIA, and we start to put that through some effects. And then we can add in the sidechain in the boom. So So again, it gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to do a lot with limited items or limited modules or limited pieces of gear. So again, yes, there's a lot of gear here. Yes, there's a lot of voices. And for me, that's to give me a lot of different variety that I can reach for when I get inspiration. But you can hear that if you set it up the right way, you don't need a lot. Like, you just need something that can give you some really good drum percussion low end, and then a way to make some interesting sounds on the higher end and in the melodic side of things that you can then affect in interesting ways. So you don't need to have, I think this has like 20 voices in this case. You don't need to have that many options. I have them just because I can put them in this case, and it gives me a lot of options of things that I can do, but you don't need them, right? You can do a lot with a little. So again, if we were to go back to that, that kind of melodic bit, that was coming from the warp. Change views, you can see that there. So, and that gives us something kind of interesting with a lot of different harmonic content that we can start to send through effects. And you can hear it being affected by the sidechain. Or I can take that off and it becomes kind of a drone. But with the sidechain, it adds to the rhythm already without the kick. And then we can bring that kick in. So you can see you can get a lot of interesting stuff from really minimal amount of things. So then it's a lot easier to switch your central focus from one main item to another main item, as long as you keep your ideas of each thing easy enough to control. That's, I guess, the key point there. So let's see what else we got here. Let's see. Nice adding the battering ram as a secondary kick. Yeah, it was, for me, the battering ram's so great and it's so easy to control and really dial in that it does really well in this atmosphere, because you can really make it cut through even with that big boomy kick from the boom. So yeah, they work, they play really nicely together. So let's see what else we got here. Amazing what you can do with effects. Yeah, like the effects are key. I mean, being able to have good quality effects that you have control over, and that fit kind of with your sound palette, kind of with your aesthetic. So the stuff that I'm doing is kind of this darker hypnotic techno, and because of that, there are certain things, certain filters, certain reverb, certain delays that sound better with that, and so I kind of go for that. But if you're doing house music, or if you're doing drum and bass or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You can use the same ideas. Just make sure that the sound palette that you choose from the start goes with what you're kind of looking for as your end kind of sound aesthetic. And it makes it a lot easier, because then you know whatever you reach for is going to fit. It's going to go with what you're doing. Let's see here. How do you tell one black cable from another? I don't. I mean, and that's kind of part of the idea. If you look at from the overhead view here, it's a lot easier to see what we're doing here. But one thing that you'll notice is the black cables kind of disappear into the setup. And if you look, you can really see clearly things that are written on the modules. And so that's one reason why I really like all black cables, because they don't distract from what's through them. You can really see through them really easily. And it's one reason why, I mean, I like a black aesthetic anyway. It's just you can notice the black t-shirt, but I like it anyway. But you can actually tell the difference now that I have the boom kick here, because it's got this silver strip, and it's really difficult to read, especially in the dark, what's written in black on a silver panel, but it's really easy to read what's written in white on a black panel. And so for me, having black panels with things written in white makes it so much easier in a dark nightclub to be able to see things, because of course you want to try to remember what everything does, but every once in a while I'd be like, oh, wait a minute, which one is that? So you want to be able to look at it and see it. And so to be able to see that clearly in a dark environment is really important. So that's why that. And so the idea of the black cables is I want them to disappear. Once it's patched, I want them to disappear so they're not distracting from what I'm actually doing in the performance, because I'm not patching and unpatching these much. And if I am going to patch or unpatch something, I actually will use these cables, which are a different color. So if I was going to patch something like, say, from the Griffin's Claws, I would patch out from there, and you can see that it's something totally different, because in that case, it's important for me to follow that path. In this case, the only way that I would need to know one cable from another is if something wasn't working. And in that case, I'll just grab it and I'll trace it with my hands and go through to what I need. But that's so rare that for me, functionally, it's way more important that the cables just kind of disappear into the darkness when I'm playing live, so that way I don't have to hassle with, I don't have trouble seeing what's going on. And that's another reason too why, if you notice the way things are routed, it's either routed through this area between the panels where it's just patch points, so it keeps everything else clean, or I like to route around on both sides, and I'll put modules on the end. So like underneath here, I have the Oxy pipe, and because I don't ever need to touch that when I'm performing, so it doesn't matter to me if a whole bunch of cables are burying that. So I'll run things around and then go in between the two cases to get to where they need to, or I'll run up to this next row and go in through here. So that way I'm not patching from like here. Like what gets frustrating here, I'll show you with a bright cable so you can see. Like if I was to patch from, let's say, here across to here, well, this is going to get in my way all the time, and that color is going to distract. And let's say you've got, 5 or 10 of these going across, it's really difficult to see through underneath what they are. So in my live performance rig, I set it up like this because I don't need to patch a lot. Now, I do have a ton of different colored cables that I use in my studio rig, because often when I'm patching there, I'm experimenting with sounds. So it's important for me to see where I have things patched to be able to move them and try them in different, modulation sources or whatever. But in a live rig, I want it, once I have it patched the way I want it to be patched, then I want to be able to do everything else using the modules, using the knobs and faders and stuff like that. So that's why. That's why the black cables, and why I can't tell the difference between one another. So that's why I would have to trace it with my hand. So let's see here. Braille, yeah, exactly. Denver represent. What's up, Todd? Just down the road from me here in Denver. Watching from Ireland. Welcome, Jason. Manchester, UK. Amazing. Always do that in Ableton Live. It's fun if the kick is different in timbre in comparison to the main kick. Yeah, and that's one of the cool things too. Like you'll notice here, I'll pull off the reverb. So like this is a pretty doesn't need to be like a crazy powerful kick like that. But if you've got a kick that's like this, having a secondary kick, I can make it mimic, or if I want, because the battering ram is so easy to dial in, I can make it something totally different, or I can make it more of a tom. So I can really change up the timbre without having to get too deep into that foundational kick drum that I'm using for the main stuff. And when you do have the reverb, the cool thing when you've got a different drum is it really cuts through in terms of the mix. So even with that big, fat, heavy reverb in there, you can still really hear this. And that's without a lot of envelope. And that's at a relatively low volume as well, right? So if I was to bring this up, so you you can really hear it, but you don't need to. And that's one big advantage is when you've got the two separate ones with slightly different timbre, they really differentiate one from the other. You can make them similar if that's the idea that you want. If you wanted the idea of how I was doing this before, where I was doing different velocities, you can make the timbre simple and then just have the velocity be different. So different ways to do it, but that kind of serve the same purpose so that you can hear each one without having either one of them be a distraction. All right. Let's see, my standard setting for Bohm and Groover. Yeah, it's kind of where like that kind of cross between the drum taps and the reverb, for me, seems to be the most functional. Like it's the one that I get a lot of use out of, but you can change it. And also this effect, I have it as a low pass filter, so I can take out the taps if I want to, and I can filter out the high end of that white noise and make it just be a darker reverb. But you can adjust what this effect is and make it be different things if you want as well, which is pretty cool. So let's see here. What is that sound? Something weird going through a reverb there. Anyway, let's see. Also lots of fun to go back and forth, the different rumbles in the Bohm while playing live. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is you can really change it up while you're playing. So if you just want it to be the taps, you can do that. Or you can be here and then you can bring up that filter or really make it darker. And then you've got obviously pitch and length and all different kinds of stuff that you can do with it that make it really interesting as well. Let's see here. Bohm is so cool. Not sure if it's worth to get back into modular. Yeah. I mean, if you're in modular, it's definitely worth getting. If you're not, I don't know if it's worth changing your whole life to make that a thing. Let's see here. What do we got? Hey, what's going on, unknown artist? Welcome. Hi, did I miss the drop explanation? No, I have not done the drop explanation. And part of that's because the drop's not officially out yet. I'll be doing some videos on it to kind of walk through the whole thing. Right now, I'm really using it to control the 1010 black box. And so I've got kind of like what I was doing with the Launch Control XL before here. I've got 8 volume faders for tracks 1 through 8 in the black box. Then the next row is pitch for those same things. Then the next row, I've got 8 knobs controlling the volume of 9 through 16. And the next row is pitch for those. So that's how it's controlling the black box. I'm setting it up right now to control all 8 channels in the Oxy Choral. Because again, in performance, it can be difficult to switch between the different voices, but having them all mapped here is going to be really interesting for that. So working on that right now to kind of get that set up the way that I want to. And then I have some extra knobs. We'll see what they work on. So I can send to multiple different devices. So I can go to the Digitakt as well, or to the Polycinematic, or to the Warp, and use MIDI to control any of those. It's also got CV out, so I could control that as well. And it has built-in merge, MIDI merge, so I can go sequence out via MIDI from the Oxy into the drop, where it will merge with the drop's MIDI and then go out into a device. So then I can have the sequence pass through, and then all of those CC messages from the drop can be assigned to different knobs. And the other cool thing with the drop that we'll talk a bit more about when I do some more long form videos on these is that each one of the knobs can be assigned up to 8 destinations. So they can be these really powerful macros. So for example, let's say you had something that was going out via MIDI and CV combo to filter cutoff on every single filter in your whole live setup. You could map all those to one master filter cutoff knob and have that be always your master filter cutoff in your live rig. So like things like that you could do, or have it changing up LFO speeds, going to multiple different devices or whatever. There's a lot of different things that you can do when you can set up those larger, more powerful macros. So Yes. Let's see. Too bad Luigi doesn't have the black ones in stock anymore. I'm sure they'll come back. I know he's been working on getting some new stuff. I know that the regular straight ones, he just got it back in stock with a whole bunch of different ones. So keep checking back because I'm sure he will. And if you let him know, shoot him a message and say, hey, I'd love more black ones. Like he's a one-man shop. So if people aren't buying a certain color or a certain thing, he's not going to spend a lot of money to make those. But if a bunch of people want them, I'm sure he would do it. So definitely send it out to him. He's very receptive to that kind of stuff. Patch cables getting in my way was one of the reasons why I returned to non-modular. Yeah, and you really have to make an effort to manage your cables correctly and get the right length. So like when I'm patching, once I have everything out, I lay out my patch cables that I have all in order of size. So I get exactly the size that I need each time that I patch to be able to follow the route that I want. So like if, for example, if I wanted a device, like let's say I wanted the polycinematic to go into this, into my mixer, which is over on this side, I would go down here and all the way down and then down to wherever that was going in. So I need that length of cable rather than going from here across and then having it get in my way. And then I'm constantly like swimming through this mass of spaghetti cables. It's just, for me, that's not fun. I want to be able to see everything when I'm performing. So that's why I try to patch everything and keep everything as much out of the way as I possibly can. See what else. Can recommend tendrils cables. Yes, they're very good as well. I have actually a couple in this case right here. There's one that's a little bit longer, but yeah, I have quite a few of those as well. Also really good. The thing I love about the Luigis is I really love how flexible they are, where the tendrils ones are very stiff. And which is good if once you put them into a place, they stay in that place. The Luigi's ones, I like how that they can really flexibly go around things, and they're also the ends on them are much, much smaller, where the tendrils, you have to line them up a specific way in order for them to work. And if that's not the direction you want the cable to go, then it's harder to kind of move it around. And with these, they're really small so that they can fit in really tight spaces next to each other. So both very good. And I use both of them all the time. But I definitely have been partial to the Luigi's ones. What else here? Tendrils will help a lot. Modules are all designed in different ways. So cable routing is not that easy. Yeah, exactly. Wish you could have two effects on the groover at the same time because you don't have a separate output only for the rumble. You do, actually. There's a output down here that says taps, and that is just the output from the taps from this module. So it does go out the main, and then you also have a second one, so you could do those two things separate. I haven't set it up that way, but I'm almost positive that's the case because the taps one has a black square around it or circle around it, which is the same thing that the output of the main has. I don't know if it removes it from the main or if it is in addition to the main, but there is an output just for the taps, so you do have that. What else? Can't wait for the release of the drop. Have mine pre-ordered. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I will say if there's one drawback, it takes a long time to get set up, but that's to be expected. Anytime you have anything that's this deep, you have so much control over so many parameters. And what you do is you basically go in and set up your individual devices and then you save them into the drop. And then when you're building a preset, you say, I want to use this device, and this device, and I want them routed this way. So you kind of pull from this library of things that you've set up at the beginning. So the initial setup, just be ready. It's going to take some time. It's kind of like with an Octatrack, when you're setting it up to perform with, there's a lot to do because it's really deep. So there's a lot of setup time. But then once you're on stage performing with it, all that setup kind of goes to the background and then you just play. And the drop actually has two different modes. There's like a setup mode and a play mode, a performance mode. And it's that thing, you go into setup mode. It's very much like the Warp, which is from the same company. He does these kind of dual workflows, which I think is really clever because when you're in studio/setup workflow, that's when it's like menu diving. There's a lot of things to do to get to all of those really powerful tools that these devices can do. But then you can totally avoid all of the menu diving during a performance, which is when it's important to be able to do it. So I think that he's found this really cool way to get all of the depth of a really powerful instrument without having any of that be a problem when you're performing live, right? So it's cool how having the split workflow on both devices. All right, let's see here. What's up, James? Welcome, welcome. Rinse show was tremendous. Thanks, brother. That's what we're talking about here, the rinse setup. Taps is just the envelope out. Really? Huh. I didn't even know there was an envelope there. Because that's not the way this works. This is a secondary kick, and then there's each one of the taps isn't really a tap delay. It's just a volume level for that position in the count of that kick. So I'll mess around with it and I'll check online and see if I can find that for the next time we do a live stream, if I can make some more sense of it. But yeah, let's see here. Really enjoyed, impressed with how you built to control the energy over 2 hours. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. That was the plan. Definitely needs a lot of setup time at first, but it makes so much possible. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, anything for me, that's the struggle that a lot of these hardware companies go through, is finding that balance between power, functionality, depth of functionality that these devices can do, and keeping the workflow simple and streamlined. So like Electron does a great job of doing in their modern boxes, not the Octatrack, but in the modern boxes, they do a great job of giving you really fast access to a pretty deep set of features. And then you've got other companies that are not so good at it, like Roland, for example. It's really difficult to get to the depth of their features on the little tiny screen with one knob that's the only thing that you can do, and it gets really frustrating. So you can't really do anything live. You have to set everything up, and then you've just got like volume and mutes. But with an Electron box, I think they found a good happy medium. And I think what Warp did, what Noisite did with the Warp and the Drop, is they made it so that you have two workflows rather than having this kind of compromised workflow of not having too much functionality that it gets cluttered, which is what I think the Electron boxes do. And then having it, what they've decided to do is go like, we're going to go super deep in the functionality and make it so that you set up a performance workflow within that depth, and then you leave that behind and you go to just the performance level, where you've got like in the Warp, it's these 8 macros that you have that you can kind of mess with during performance, and you assign what those are, and they can have multiple destinations, and they can do all kinds of really interesting stuff once you've set them up. And I think the Drop's going to be the same. It's going to be really simple. I mean, it is really simple to use in a performance once you've put in the time to set it up in these really complex ways, however you want to. And then it's like, yeah, I have 6 different devices routed through CV and MIDI on 4 different MIDI channels, going to all these different things that all come to one knob. And then when I perform, I just turn that one knob. So you keep the performance really smooth and easy and streamlined once you've put in the time to make the behind the scenes part really work. So a lot of similarities in workflow, even though they're totally different types of devices. You can see that that's kind of the way that Thomas and his team have kind of really focused on this. So yes, what do we got here? Try it out. How many riffs or sounds have you discovered and then lost to never discover again? I would say an infinite number, because again, like I don't save anything. So like if you were to go into the saved section of this was just when I was messing around with something, but this is I only have one pattern. Even in my Digitact, I only have one project, and then I'll use it, and then I'll overwrite or I'll delete. because the idea for me is that it's not about making things that I can recall. It's about using this in a way that I can make things in the moment instead of having to recall something that I made before, if that makes sense. So like I can do certain things. For example, I know the way the gear sounds. So like if I want a, like a percussive tonal thing, I know that's what the Percon's voice is set up for right now. So I know that's going to be a tonal percussive thing. If I want this to be like a car plus strong sound, I know that I can go to there and that's what it's going to sound like. Right? I know that's what it's going to get me to by knowing the gear really well. So I don't need to save a preset of that so that I can get back to it. And then I need to memorize preset number 43 is that thing. I just remember this engine with these kind of settings, I know what it's going to sound like. And so that's kind of what I spend the time on rather than creating things that I can recall later on, if that makes sense. And it's one thing I actually really love about the Warp, because the Warp can save presets. But what is interesting is this whole section up here, up above, it's called the Galaxy, and it's got these controls for like XY axis. You can see that it can kind of move around the light there. And within that Galaxy, you have 512 individual wavetables. And you can design those wavetables using wavetable synthesis, samples, additive synthesis, all sorts of things to make those wavetables in that kind of studio workflow. And then once you set up this grid, and you don't have to fill all 512, you can just fill the corners if you want or whatever. Then you use those knobs to morph between those. So you've created this kind of master preset with a way to move between things rather than saying, I want preset number 6 that's going to sound this certain way, which you can also save in here like that. I just don't save those kind of presets. I like saving the Galaxy and saying, this is a mood that I like. This is a palette that I want to work from. And during the show, I'm going to find those spots that I like, and I'm going to work within that using the macros that I've set up and using that to explore within that. So it becomes just like another synth that has its own kind of palette of stuff to work from, if that makes sense. So one reason why I've really been enjoying that module a lot. All right, let's see here. Could you share a bit about your thought, how you thought through or built storytelling of your set and how you split the time to take us on that 2-hour journey? Sure. I mean, I hope this doesn't disappoint anybody, but there wasn't much planning. It's really, I had this general idea that I wanted to start off, create a mood and be patient before I kind of changed up that mood. And then I wanted to build to a point where I kind of got to, more interesting, I don't want to say fever pitch, but like the more kind of dramatic, faster, aggressive, kind of more peak sounds, and move through some of those moods with still some kind of ebb and flow and tension and release and stuff. And then towards the end, for the last hour, I just wanted it to settle into this real hypnotic groove and make it more slow transitions from sounds to sounds. And that was kind of the overall kind of map, but that was as far as how deep as it went. That and kind of a sound palette was about as deep as it went. So then it was, the whole idea was to kind of start off kind of atmospheric and slow. That's what I was showing with this before. This was kind of what I started off with. And I left the sequence in here because I wanted to be able to show that this was the thing that I was using in the Warp. And the other cool thing is that my send for the Desmodus is pre-fader. So there were times also in that set when I didn't even bring up the fader on this sound. I just brought up the reverb effect. So actually I have the volume down on it right now. So you notice the fader's not up. That's just the completely wet signal from the Desmodus. So it kind of softens off the edges instead of having and have things be too aggressive. I just pulled that all the way out, and put this out like this. And being able to make changes on this effect is pretty cool. So again, that's just that part, just the affected part, and not anything else. So having effects 1 pre-fader allows me to do that with anything. So even like, for example, with the bass line, I don't know what's on there. So the Ericsson's bass line, there's just like a bass, here, I'm gonna filter it way down. I can not bring that up and just send that through the effect. And that creates kind of a tonal, atmospheric background bit. And then if I want, I can start to bring it in. And it sounds like 2 voices, right? It sounds like there's a drone in the background or an atmosphere in the background, and they just happen to be in key with each other. But they're in key because it's the same sound doing the same notes. But again, it's a short way to get you different things. And then you can bring up the filter cutoff. Take the resonance down so it's not quite so acidy. And then the other thing with this is it's detuned right now, so it's doing kind of like a super saw or kind of like a Reese bass. And then you can add in sub bass as well. Now, if I was to take that bass out, but leave in that background drone, that's just the effect. So now let's change things. Take out the sub, bring up the resonance, bring up the cutoff. So again, that's using a Reese bass deep kick module to create an atmospheric background sound just by using a single send effect. And so that's the thing, is kind of using and reusing things as much as you can, so you're not always trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think this is something that I find when I talk to students in my course and when I talk to other live performers, one of the things that everybody struggles with is trying to, how do I make a whole song with all these different elements and all these different sounds, and then make a whole other song with all these different elements and sounds, and then find a way to get from one to the other in a transition that makes sense. And because things are so overcomplicated in both of those two things, and there's only one way that they go together because they're kind of predetermined tracks that you wrote ahead of time, it makes it so that you create extra challenge for yourself, where if you reuse sounds like this, so if I know, for example, that I'm going to bring in the Basto Pizza, which is doing this like little 3-note thing that we haven't even heard yet, I don't even know really what it sounds like, but if I know I'm going to use that, I can bring in that background effect and have that be the atmosphere. Right? And then I can mess around with that sound. I can bring it down an octave, and I can adjust the filter, and I can change up. And all of that is coming from a 3-note sequence, 8-step, 3 notes. Here, I'll show you this, 3 notes on the Basto Pizza. Now, if I bring in the original, you'll hear what that's coming from. Bring it down an octave. take some of those effects off. Classic FM sounds. So again, that's the original, but if I pull that out and just bring up the reverb effect, that purely wet reverb, now we've got something in the background. Now if I bring in the sidechain ducking from the boom, again, nothing's up yet, right? None of these channels are up. This is just reverb send. And I can send reverb from original signal from multiple tracks through that reverb. So if I do the pizza and the bass line, it becomes even more complex. Take out the side chain, as you can hear. Bring that ducking back in. So you can do stuff that's droney and atmospheric, but it's also laying the foundation for what you're gonna do later, right? So now if we wanna bring in kick drum, you can filter that up to bring it in. But it's already gonna match with what we're doing because of the sidechain. And then maybe I want to filter the whole thing before I drop into that kick. And again, nothing's up yet. The only actual sound that's up is the boom and the reverb with it. Make it really crazy, take it out. And then I can shift that by taking one out and bringing the other one up more. Right, so you can see there's a ton of flexibility just from having good effects to be able to mess with those things. So that was kind of how I got into that mood of things. Another trick that I use a lot when I'm starting off a set, if I want to build from slower to faster, I don't like to do gradual tempo increases because I think it throws off the dance floor. The people need to have something that they can lock into as far as when they dance. So what I will do is, in general, I will start off with a 16-step kick pattern that has just 2 hits on it. So it ends up being like a heartbeat. So it feels like it's slow, right? But this is still at 140 BPM. But it just feels slow because there's less hits of that kick. So it's a way to get things started off moody. So using, let's say, the background of those atmospheres again. And this was how I started off that set, was background atmospheres with this slow kind of heartbeat kick drum. And if you take out the attack and make it a bit longer, so again, this feels slow, but again, it's at 140 BPM. So if I was to just drop in the other 4 on the floor steps on this, right? So you see, that's the tempo that we're at. But if we take those out, and we go back down to just that kind of heartbeat pulse, we basically are dividing it in half. So it's like if we were starting off at 70 instead of 140, but we then don't have to change up the tempo and find a way to make it sound smooth without tripping the people on the dance floor trying to find a way to dance to something, right? So it can give them some continuity through what they're doing. Take out my atmosphere stuff here, and we'll go back to the chat. Let's see here. What's next? Hi, Manu from Mexico, living in Ottawa. All right. Thanks for your great job. Thank you. I got my Oxy One over a week ago, and it's amazing, but I have some background noise. Anyone have the same problem? Thanks so much. It depends on what kind of background noise. If it's kind of staticky noise like we had before, it might be ground loop. So if you're charging at the same time that you're using it, sometimes it's good to plug into a different outlet if you're doing that. Depends if you've got it plugged into a laptop and then you're using that laptop, sometimes that can create it. Then all you have to do is just switch off the charging in the device. So it'll only give you the MIDI signal or whatever, audio over USB, MIDI over USB, and you won't have the power circuit going along with that, so you won't get that noise. So it might be that, but I would definitely check that for sure. There should be more gear specifically designed for live performance. I agree. Erica's Percons was pretty spot on. It is. It's a great, the Percons itself is a great device. However, I would say it is not perfectly designed for live performance because it's gigantic. So it's great for live performance if your live performance is 10 minutes from your house and you're going to go in your car. I was never able to bring my Percons with me when I would travel to play gigs because I couldn't fit it in my carry-on luggage. And I don't like to check stuff that I need for my show, because if my bag doesn't show up, which has happened a few times, then I don't have everything that I need for performance. So yeah, it's a great sounding device, and it's a great device to use. But I will say it's not a great device to travel with, which is why when the Percons voice came out, I was super excited because I could get all of that stuff in a modular voice. So if you basically had 4 Percons voices and a delay in your case, you have a whole Percons, which is amazing. And then you obviously a sequencer you would need as well. So, but I agree with you, more stuff that's specifically geared toward live performance. You know, there's things that you guys have probably heard me talk about if you've watched any of these before, but it's amazing to me that nobody has filled the space in the market for a standalone performance mixer that is not a giant 30-pound DJ mixer, and it's not a MIDI controller for a computer, and it's not a modular mixer, and it's not a big desktop studio mixing desk with a bunch of things that you don't need that end up making it really heavy again to travel with, but something that's like focused on performance. Now, if you're in the modular world, you have a ton of options. Obviously, I use the Board Brain. There's great options from WMD, from Noise Engineering, from 1010. There's all these companies that have made really cool modular mixers, but you have to be in that modular world, and they're really designed for modulation and, you know, modular signal levels and stuff like that. And there's been a couple of ones that have come out. There's the Auto, the Baby Sherry, and then there's what was the ALM one? What was that called? I don't know. Somebody will put that in the chat what it was. I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, there's been a couple that have come out, but none of them for me, at least in my personal style, are performance mixers in the way that, like, say, for example, the Board Brain Exelon is, or any of those other mixers that I spoke of. You know, really the Exelon and the WMD are the two that for me are the most performance mixery of all, because they have nice long faders that feel really nice, so you can see where you're at. You can push multiple things at once, which you can't do if you're doing with knobs. Multiple effect sends, having, dual mono or stereo inputs, having stereo channels, having gain per channel, like all of that stuff is really handy in these mixers. And doing things like, if you look at the board brain, one of the things that I love about this is that you can hear me talking about this a lot. I use effect sends a ton during my performance. So the fact that the effect send buttons are larger, and so you get like some good resistance, you've got a good control over how much you're sending with this, rather than having it be a tiny little knob on a scaled down mixer, or something on a touch screen on the 1010 Blue Box. So for me, this is a performance mixer. Like, this feels like performance, and maybe it's just coming from the DJ world that this feels more like a DJ mixer. But you saying that having more gear that's designed specifically for live performance, there's a huge gap of looking for that. Like, for people who aren't in modular, but who want to be able to travel portably, so they don't want to bring a huge DJ mixer or a desktop mixer, and have something that's functional, like, yeah, there's a need for sure. And I think with some other things too, one of the things that I get asked about a lot is kind of end of chain stuff. And there are some boxes, like I've used the analog heat plus effects, the auto boom. Some of those are really cool for end of chain, but they're not really specifically designed to be an end of chain box. Like, you can make them work for those things. But I think there's also an opportunity there for something that's, kind of a combo of the things you want for kind of an end mastering chain. So like, you get things like the auto boom, which you've got saturation and compression, which is, I guess, cool. I don't use compression on my master, but so you've got that. But then you've got things like the heat plus effects that adds in bass mono and kind of drive circuits and stuff like that. So that's interesting as well. They have a little bit of EQ, which is cool. Nice to have an EQ on your master. So, but just having something that's really purposely designed for that, I think there's a gap for. So I agree, having things that are more designed for performance. And even when you get into the world of modular, I was talking with some friends at Superbooth this year, and we were saying you could always tell when a module is designed by an engineer versus when it's designed by a live performer. And sometimes you get this magical combination when you have live performers who are also engineers, and then you get, for me, the best modules. You get people like William from WMD, or Francois from Shachmat, or the guys from Board Brain, or from Ohmforce. Like, a lot of these companies, they're performers, so they make a module that's made for perform. I mean, you can look around this case, and kind of anything that's in here is pretty much designed by performer/engineers. And then you get these kind of esoteric, trippy, interesting, sound designy type modular modules, which tend to be designed by the people who are, more into the nerdy side of the electronics gear, and like, let's see what we can make that's interesting and unique that nobody's ever made before, which I think is also a really cool part of modular. But for live performance, I love the modules that are made by live performers who are also engineers. Gertz from Erica Sense, and the folks from Noise Engineering, and all of this stuff. Like, all those companies are so good about this stuff because they perform live, and a lot of times they're making the modules they want to use live. So I dig those for sure. And Thomas at Noisite is another one who's very much, he is a live performer. Like, at Superbooth, the rig that he had in the booth to demonstrate the drop was his personal live performance rig. So he's like making the drop because he's a performer, and he's like, well, what would I like this thing to do? And I love when these people start from that idea. They start from the end user, not like, how many things can I make it do and it will find its user? I like these guys when they think of like, here's the user, what do they need? They need these things, and then they put that into a module. So it's pretty cool. I love that. All right, let's see what else. What's up, Ed? Jason, Synthad, Mark, what's happening, man? Love watching these streams. I'm learning so much. Well, I watch your stuff and learn so much. So thank you, Mark. Synthad is the king of modular tutorials with this super tone of, you can do it, it's fun, you're gonna love this. I love it. Anyway, let's see. Really like using the heartbeat as well, so slow yet powerful. Yeah, I borrowed that idea from Colin Benders. He does that a lot too. So yeah, it's a fun one. Offer today, take care, talk to you later. Thank you as well. Good point in the Percon size. Yeah, I wish it was smaller, but whatever. Really would love to see some performance effects unit like the Pioneer RMX 1000. So I have a question for you. Oh, hey Matthew, what's going on? Cheers from Marseille. Bonjour. Prendre un Ricard pour moi. So interesting you mentioned, I would love to see a performance effects unit like the RMX 1000. That's interesting. Why not just use an RMX 1000? So it goes to that idea, like that is something that is specifically designed for that job. The RMX 1000 and the RMX 500 are really specifically designed as performance effects units for DJ sets or hardware, either way. If you're doing modular, you can use the Oxymeta, which does probably 3/4 or 2/3 or 3/4 what the RMX 1000 does in a little tiny module, which is why I use it. I love having those kind of performance effects. But I agree with you. Performance effects are really great for making your performance sound coherent and making it kind of fit with DJ performances. Not necessarily sound like, because you don't necessarily want to sound like a DJ performance, but you want to be able to fit with them and not have it sound so dramatically different that the audience doesn't understand what's going on. So having performance effects can be really important. So that's why Meta's great. And I would say if you were going to use something outside using, out of modular and using hardware, I would use the RMX 1000 or the RMX 500. Or if you have an Octatrack, I would use EasyBot's template, because that's where you're going to get a ton of performance effects that you can slap on your main as well. So there's a lot of different ways to do it with hardware for performance effects, I think. But let's see, what else we got here? Love your initial thoughts on the Bohm. How am I using it compared to the battery RAM? Well, I'm using them together, and that was kind of one of the things I was showing before, but it was a really important part of the that live set for Rinse FM, because that was really kind of the first time I used the Bohm in a live set. And I love having the ability to have two separate kick lines and have it be, let's do, I love having two separate kick lines so that I can have one be kind of my 4 on the floor kick. That's a little crazy. Shorten that up a bit. So I like having one 4 on the floor kick and then using that second line to sequence rhythmic changes in that using the battering ram and being able to dial it in based on the sound. So again, make it really subtle and have it come in like this. And have it be kind of subtle, subby, pulsy, or have it be more kind of boomy and be its own kind of secondary counter rhythm. And then being able to dial in the transient. And that's at like half volume. So it's cool to be able to do that. You can bring it way down and have it be really subtle in a mix, or you can bring it and have it almost take over. Right? So I love using it like that because then I can mix things up, right? And I can do and then when you start to add in the Bohm, and dial in some of those taps with the echo, so you can get some really interesting groovy low end just by putting those two kicks together. And then if you start to add in other rhythmic stuff, so like if I was to make this something more, then a little offbeat hat. The Percon's voice has a ton of really interesting sounds in it. Again, then we go to my kind of favorite go-to things and start to put these through effects. So particularly the Percon's voice, because you've got some higher harmonics there, so it'll sound better through effects without cluttering things up. So there you go, like you get this really kind of groovy, fun, bouncy low end and drums and percussion, just using two kicks, an offbeat hat, and one percussive element. So this gives you a great foundation to work from. Then you can bring in a simple melodic tone or two, maybe doing a call and response. So let's do like a call and response between the pizza and the BIA. So if I do, so if we bring in the pizza, and then the BI, and then start to add in some effects on those. And then because we've got this, the sidechain, we can keep it from getting too cluttered by ducking things out of the way and making them more rhythmic. So again, single note on one, two notes on the other, but if I take those out and take out their sends, we've still got a low end that you can dance to, right? A low end that's groovy, so it allows it to stay really, really simple. Because then if you want to change up this thing, you can change one of those two elements. So like, let's bounce up the BIA to a higher octave. And then we can add in a couple of other notes to that to make it also interesting. So it changes up that dynamic with only having to change a couple of notes. Then if we go back to the BIA, back to the pizza, we can change the octave of that. So it can give you a whole bunch of different options. And if you look at the sequences, this is only 2 notes on the pizza, and it's only 3 notes on the BIA, but they're playing off each other in different ways. If you want to make it really interesting, then you can actually make, let's change the start point of this BIA one to make it, instead of 16 steps, let's make it 12 steps. They start to act differently with each other because you've got one that's polymetric, and then you've got another one that's still going in the regular, the length of the pattern. So again, you can get a lot of variety from a relatively simple combination of elements if you're keeping those elements together in a way that makes sense. Like that's the key to all of this, is to make sure that those elements that you use, you're not overcomplicating it, but you're using things that fit into the right place. So for example, with a call and response, you've got things that are in opposition to each other rhythmically, so they're not hitting at the same time. So then you don't have to worry about frequencies getting messed up and EQing and mixing and compressing one and making sure they fit. So you can use the position and the frequency spectrum to make sure that things fit together really well. So that's a lot of what I was doing in this Rinse FM set, is that I was moving things through those patterns and saying, okay, now we're doing this type of mood and I want to move to something else. So I'm just going to start moving elements, and I'm going to be inspired by what those elements sound like as they start to move. And that's going to give me ideas to say, okay, now I want to bring in this other thing. Now I want to take this one out. We've had this enough. And I want to kind of, it gives you ideas about where to go next. So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book, if you had those when you were a kid, where you go along and then you get a choice, and then you decide to go down this road, and then you get a choice, and then you go down this, and then you get a choice. It's like that for me when I'm doing a live set, where I'm going to start off and it's just a matter of it being a series of creative choices that are inspired by what's going on. And I say, do I want to bring up the energy, bring down the energy? Do I want to make it the kick more aggressive? Do I want to change up the hat? Do I want to make it bouncier? Do I want to make it more driving? And all of that's inspired by the moment. And then I'll just kind of take whatever's going on with the gear and go down that road. So yeah, long explanation. Let's see where we at here. More questions. I own the RMX 1000. It's perfect in a live set setting. It does not have to be played in a DJ setup. I agree. I mean, I think that if I was going to go for an effects unit, non-modular, to use by itself, it would either be, if I had just an Octatrack laying around, I would use the Performance template. Great option. And if I didn't, and I was just going to get something relatively inexpensive, I would get an RMX 500, because they're half the price of the RMX 1000, which is half the price of an Octatrack. So you can get them used for half the price of an Octatrack. So you can make your own decision. It depends on what you already have. If you already have an Octatrack, why buy an RMX 1000? Just get the Performance template and go for it. So anyway, if the RMX 1000 is very much DJ oriented, maybe somebody could build something for synths. I mean, I have to say I disagree. I kind of agree with Matthew. I think it's performance oriented. So it's used by a lot of DJs, but that doesn't mean that it's DJ oriented. I don't understand what would be a different thing that you would prefer to have as a performance effect than what you have with that would be specifically for synths. But if you want to clarify that in the chat, definitely do, because I'm curious what you mean by that. And I know that sometimes people from the companies, it's kind of stalk around in these live streams. So give somebody an idea. Say like, hey, somebody should make this, and here's specifically what I would like. And I think they would be into it. But I don't know what would be different between something that was geared towards synths versus recorded music as far as performance effects go. Now, performance mixers, I can tell you there is a big difference. One of the things that, one of the big differences for me is on a DJ mixer, you absolutely have to have multi-band EQ, because that's your only way to subtly mix different bands of frequencies or different instruments one with the other, is by EQing one in and EQing another one out at the same time. And that allows you to be smooth about how you blend one completed track with another completed track. In the live performance world, we don't really need that because we're blending individual elements. I'm bringing in a bass module while I'm bringing out a bass module. I don't need to bring in bass frequencies while I bring out bass frequencies, because I'm already doing that at the module level, because I have micro control over each individual element of a track when I'm making it live on the fly, where a DJ doesn't have any control over the individual elements. The only control you have is frequency bands using the EQ. So you might want to have EQ on individual instruments in your rack, in which case I would just say get an EQ module. But the mixer itself doesn't need that like you need it for DJing, because there it's your only source of control of different frequencies. Here I have ultimate control over frequencies because I have a filter on every instrument. I have each instrument's volume level. I have each instrument's, different effects and stuff. So I can control those things on a sound by sound, synth by synth, instrument by instrument basis, which you can't do when you DJ. So that's one of those things that in that case, there is a DJ version that's important. But as far as end of chain effects, I'm not sure what you're looking for. So put that into the chat because I'm curious what you would see as different. Easy bots templates for Octatracker on another level. I totally agree. Won't help you at all as it wouldn't fit on the plane, but I'd love to try the variant your X32 rack or wing and have some MIDI controllers to take care of the performance. I mean, yeah, I guess you could. But again, that's, for me, there's things that are made for live performance, and there's things that are made for production, writing, studio, home use. And we try to kind of, shoehorn one into the other, where for me, it's better to just make those choices and say, this gear that I have here, this fits into my carry-on. This is my performance stuff. And then I have a whole other rack, which here, I'll switch, you can see. This whole rack over here is a 15U104 modular rack that's just stuff that for me doesn't fit with my kind of live performance workflow, but it's stuff that I love. So there's things that I leave at home because they don't fit. And I don't mean don't fit physically. Some of it's because they don't fit physically, but it's because they don't fit with kind of the workflow of improvising live performance. They fit with the workflow of exploratory sound design for production. And so that's why they exist in that case. So yeah, for me, I think that gear specifically made for live performance is, it's like finding a unicorn when you find that stuff that fits exactly right with your workflow. And the thing is that the workflow is different for everybody. So nobody can make like the magic box that does the thing because your workflow is going to be different from my workflow. So what you're looking for is not mine. Let's see. Used RMXs are still expensive as hell, so there has to be a market for stuff like that. Yeah, I agree. Have you ever worked with some Akai MPC Force gear? I have. I had a Force and I had an MPC Live. And it was the newer MPC Live with the speaker on the bottom. It's funny because we were just talking about workflow. I don't get along with the MPC workflow. It's for me, it just doesn't fit my style of gear. And this is different for every person, right? So the way your brain works is going to be different from the way my brain works when we're being creative and we're in that flow of making music. So for me, I found that the MPC workflow gets in my way, and it's a bit it doesn't work the way my brain works, where there's some people that they get on MPC and they just fly. Like it's exactly their connection, which is amazing. Like they should, and everybody should find that gear that fits your workflow. The MPC does not for me. And so I had, like I said, I had a Force and I had the MPC Live 2, Mark II, I guess, the one with the speaker, and sold them both because I didn't get along with the workflow at all. There were just some things that didn't make sense. Like I came from an Electron world where, like, if you've got one of the more modern, even the older Electron boxes, you have on the screen, you have 8 parameters, and next to it you have 8 knobs, and they line up. The first parameter is the first knob, the second parameter is the second knob. So for me, my brain goes, oh, that's logical. So if I jump on a new machine that I haven't used and I go, oh, it's the second one in on the bottom row, so it's going to be the knob that's the second one in on the bottom row, and that makes sense. With the MPC, like in the MPC Live, you had there's like 4 knobs next to the screen, and you've got parameters next to them sometimes, and they correlate, but sometimes the parameters are across the bottom. And so you don't know necessarily which goes with what. And sometimes there are parameters that are in different places on the screen. So you don't know instinctively which knob goes with which one. So I felt like you're constantly like this stop, start workflow. And there's a lot of menu diving, again, from that whole methodology we were talking about before, of they're super deep devices that can do so many things that they have to have a lot of menus to be able to get to all of those things when you have kind of limited knobs and buttons in the interface. So for me, I just didn't get along with the workflow. So that's why I have had both of those and ended up selling them both. So what about your Koslin? My Koslin is right over here in my studio case because I didn't have space for it when I added the boom in. So I needed a lot of space to add the boom back in. And I was like, what am I using less than other things? So one thing that I did was I took out the Koslin. I also took out a second one of my noise engineering effects and replaced it with an effects aid because that made it go from 10 HP to 6 HP. So it saved me about 4 there. What else? I also took out the Zadar because I was not using that as much in this setup either. And what else? I took out the BoardBrain IO module because I didn't have the space to set this up also for multi-tracking, which I will go to when I get my next case, but I didn't have space for it here. So that was why. That's why they came out. I was just using them less. I realized that as fun as the Koslin is and as cool as it was to have it on a send, I was using it maybe 20%, 10% of a live performance, and having something like a really, really good quality reverb on a send, like the Desmodus, I use this like 80% of the time. So for me, it's just a matter of taking out the things that I use less and putting in things that I use more. You know, I have modules in this case that I use a lot less, that if I need to put something new in, they're going to be the first things to go because I use them less than the others. Other things like, you know, these drums and percussion modules, the Pizza, the BIA, the Ghost, you know, those are ones that just, they've been in my case since I started modular because I just love them so much, and I think they'll stay forever. So anyway, that's what about the Koslin. All right, let's see here. Greetings from Singapore. Awesome. I love Singapore. What an amazing city. You can check out Allen and Heath DB4. Yeah, I mean, Allen and Heath DB4 is great if you want to haul around a 25-pound mixer when you travel to play a gig. And are you going to take that in a carry-on? Are you going to check it in a check bag? What if it doesn't show up? What if they don't have one on the other end and you're counting on it to be your end of chain? I like to take everything with me. So every single thing that you see here, this entire live rig, goes with me on the plane in hand luggage. So I don't check anything. So everything stays with me. So as soon as you add in a giant heavy DJ mixer, then you can't take everything in your carry-on luggage. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, well then what are you willing to risk maybe not having for your performance? So like I said, if you're playing at home and you're doing live stuff at home, absolutely. If your gigs are all within driving distance of home, absolutely. Or like a train if you're in Europe, absolutely. But if you need to fly, which like 80% at least of the gigs that I play, I fly to. And so I have to have everything fit into hand luggage. Otherwise, it freaks me out. I don't want to check stuff. So let's see, like a cockpit. Was that a question on something else? Not sure. Michael, what was that? What did you mean, like a cockpit? Yeah, let me know. Let's see. What's up? Synchrotron. You're a bit late. That's okay. It's all good. How are you doing, Michael? Good to see you. Michael's a former student. Glad to have you on here. Effects on the DB4 is amazing. Yep, I agree. They sound great. Only just joined. I like the look of your woven patch cables. Very practical. Thanks. Yeah, I try to use them to tie each other together so they tie each other out of the way and move around stuff. Try to get creative with that as much as I can. Will you be at Machina Brastronica? I wish. I cannot go to that this year. I will be going. So my next gigs, if you guys are interested in going to a show, I will be playing in Dayton, Ohio on the 4th of September on my way to NobCon. I'll be playing at NobCon on the 6th of September. I will be playing in Brooklyn, New York on the 20th of September. I will be playing in Berlin on the, tentatively, we'll see, days between 16th, 17th, 18th October. I'll let you know about those as they kind of come together. And then I'll be playing in Amsterdam for ADE on the 22nd and the 24th, I believe. Not sure about the dates on those. 2 gigs at Super Booth, potentially 3, sorry, at ADE, potentially 3 in Berlin the week before, and then Brooklyn, Chicago, and Dayton. Those are the next dates I have coming up. So if you're going to be at any of those, shoot me a message, let me know, introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm whatever your name is in the chat. So I'll be able to connect a face with a name and figure out who is who. Let's see, the view of your gear right now is like looking at a cockpit. Oh yeah, it is kind of like, somebody asked if this was like the Millennium Falcon. But yeah, I like how it kind of comes together to play this way, because it just gives me kind of easy reach to the things that I want. And I have the things, I like to, when I'm laying out my rig in modular grid and deciding what I'm going to put as my other pieces of gear, I like to think about where, like, which hand I like to do things with. So for example, this comes again, and this is muscle memory from decades, but from decades of DJing, I got used to having effects on my right hand. And so having the oxymeta here, I'll rest my hand here a lot when I'm playing so that I can use these effects. I like to have drums and percussion close to me because I like to play around with those. I'm actually, when I redo my case, I'm getting a new case in a few days. When I redo my case, I'm going to move some of these voices up to the top because it is a bit hard to get to the knobs down on the lower side of the case. So I want them up where I can reach them better. And then just having everything else where I can do it over here on the side and sequencing close to me so I can stay above it and kind of see what's going on. So yeah, it is kind of like a cockpit for sure. Cockpit of a fighter jet. Let's see, what else? The more I think about what my synth effects tool would look like, the more I feel it would basically be a performance mixer with a very hands-on effects section. Yeah, I mean, again, there's this thing, effects for me, there's like 3 distinct families of effects for me. So there's like insert effects, like for example, the BIA I have going through an effects aid, Pizza I have going through an effects aid. The individual modules, so like Polycinematic and Oxy, both have effects built into them. There's those insert effects, and those are kind of like sound design for that individual sound. So do you want that sound to delay or have a slapback delay or have a bit of reverb to it or whatever as an individual sound? That's what I think about for those. Then you have your send effects, which for me are kind of a secondary layer, less precise layer of sound design. So being able to put the BIA, so having a dry tone like this, putting it through an insert effect, So then it goes through an insert effect, and that becomes my root sound. But then putting it through a send to add to that kind of global atmosphere, or a second send. So then you have all these layers of effects. So for me, that's where it's really important to have a performance mixer with the, the effect sends, and having long faders, having a lot of space between things so that it plays really well. That's where that becomes really important. But then that kind of end of chain performance effect, that for me is things that you use as kind of transitional effects to get from one idea to another, or to do build-ups or breakdowns, or to change up the atmosphere of a track. And that's where I use the meta, or I would use the Octatrack performance template, or I would use an RMX 1000 or an RMX 500. So like, let's just build something just like really quick here. So like, let's say we've got this going along. So we've got some effects here. I mean, I can do things with effect sends and with individual effects on individual elements. But now what I would use performance effects for is to make the whole performance flow be coherent. So like, for example, using a high pass filter to do a little bit of a break, or to use this to maybe change to a different type of hi-hat. Right, so having performance effects like that, having things like riser effects, so to be able to do things like that, where you're using the effects to perform the show and create and build tension and release that tension and do that thing. That's for me what the performance effects are really for. So having something that can be handy to that, and that's kind of what the RMX does, what the performance template and the Octatrack does, and what the meta does is it gives you that way to not use those effects to design sound and whatever, but use those effects to design your performance and to create tension and release and do interesting, fun things in the performance. And what's cool too with this setup is that, so I've got the Oxy Meta is on the master. So that's affecting everything. So like, again, if we were to go back to, so like if we were cruising along with this type thing, if I was to high pass this, I'm high passing everything, right? High passing the entire mix, so every single instrument. Where within the BOEM, I have a filter of effects here, and you can assign what this effect is. I have this set up also as a high pass, low pass DJ style filter, and I have it set up, and you can choose in the parameters whether it affects the entire mix, like the meta, or whether it affects only the kick, or whether it affects everything but the kick. So I have it set up to only affect the kick. So if I was to engage this and high pass, I'm gonna take out my secondary kick. So I'm taking out my kick, but everything else is staying exactly the same. And I'm just keeping just the high end to keep the tempo of the kick. And then if I release this, it brings the kick back in again. So I have this to control just the kick while everything else stays the same, or this to control everything, including the kick, right? So having that kind of individual control over elements is, for me, really important from the performance aspect of it, right? To be able to have those things, to be able to choose what's going to fit the best in the performance or allow me to change the energy or create some tension or do that kind of stuff. So that's for me the importance of transition and performance effects, as opposed to having good send effects and good insert effects, if that makes sense. And again, this is my workflow. I'm not saying one way is right or wrong. This is the way I look at it, and maybe this will give you some ideas of things you can copy or things you can say like, well, that makes no sense to me, I'll never do that. Or things that you say, oh, that gives me an idea of how I can do it totally different. So I hope it's all of those things. All right, so let's see what else we have going on here. Where we at? Effects droning on in the background there. Here we go. Dayton, Ohio show is close to me. Where are you? The details. I will post that online as soon as I get. It's actually on my Instagram. There's a flyer for it. It's the Modbang event, but it's the Modbang in Dayton. So it's September 4th. I can't remember the name of the place, but look on my Instagram. It is definitely on there. Let's see, probably something that I could build from modules. Yeah, well, and then in that case, it's like modular versus non-modular. And that's why I love the meta, because it does all the kind of bread and butter kind of performance effects in a little 6 HP module. So you don't need to like take up half your case with interesting effects that will whatever. Like sometimes it's good to just kind of get to the point. And I like that that's what the meta does. It just kind of gets right to it. Let's see, tell us more about the new case. So this case that I have right now is the Morph modular case. It is a prototype of their new case, which was kind of like their first one was the Sputnik and their new one is the Explorer. And this was kind of the in-between module where they were testing out some ideas for the new case while using some of the stuff from the old case. So I got an early version of this to test out. They told me that they just shipped 2 days ago my new case, which is the new Explorer case. So it will be, this is a 12U84 case, which here I can show you, folds up just like this. So I can put it into a rolling carry-on and take it on the plane with me. So this is 12U84. The new case that's coming is going to be a 14U84, so it has a 1U row in each side, but it's still the same width, it's still 84, so it'll still be able to fit into a rolling carry-on. I had to get a different rolling carry-on, slightly different shape in order to fit the new one. But the new one will fit, I think. We'll see when they both arrive. Supposedly it will fit into this new rolling carry-on. And so I'll still be able to take everything carry-on on the plane, but I'm gonna have a couple of extra rows of 1U, which I'm still not sure what I'm gonna do with it. I'm not a big 1U user, but that's the way the case is coming. So we'll see if I can maybe put some of these 4 HP things sideways, or if I've got some 1U modules that I wanna add in. I may add in an Endorphins Golden Master, because I am still missing being able to mono my bass, my sub 200 hertz, and I can do that with the Golden Master. So I may add that in, not sure. Now with the Noisite Drop, I was thinking about adding in a MIDI to CV module, which I don't have any in the case right now. I have a few modules that run on MIDI, so like the Warp, the Polycinematic, and the Oxycoral are all running on MIDI right now. But now that I have all of these different MIDI paths coming from the drop, I was thinking about doing a MIDI to CV module or two to be able to control some parameters from the drop of different things in the case, particularly being able to use those macros to create some CV macros within the case, which I think will be pretty cool. So we'll see, but that should be coming. Supposedly it will be here in time for me to build to use in Dayton and at NobCon. So if you're at either of those shows, either in Dayton or in Chicago, you will see the case. Well, hopefully, I should say, hopefully you'll see the case. We'll have it there. Let's see here. Looking forward to seeing it at NobCon. Me too. NobCon is fun. Let's see. Trying to avoid you guys having your own conversation there. Modbang Dayton, sweet, found it. Don't forget to strike like. Yeah, I always forget stuff like that. I should do my kind of shameless plug that I always do. I am taking signups now for the September session of my improvised live performance course and my hybrid production course. So if you're interested in doing either of those, sign up now. There's a discount on my website. You go to circlelive.com/courses. You can sign up for either of those. This is going to be the last session for a little while because I'm going to be restructuring and doing different types of courses after this in kind of a different way and doing them less often because I have a lot of travel coming up soon. So if you're thinking about doing it, if you're on the fence, now is the time to do it. If you sign up now, we start end of the first week of September. It goes live. First calls I think are that week. I have to look at it again, but it's the month of September. So definitely sign up if you're thinking about it. Now's the time to do it because there's a discount and it's going to be the last one for a while just because of travel. So hope to see you in there. Where are we at here? To put a 4 to the floor to a drone. Yeah. Try some techno. That's it. 4 on the floor to a drone. I mean, one of the things for me, and I've said this a lot on all these streams, but for me, the type of techno that I do, particularly the kind of machine techno, hypnotic, kind of in some ways old school, is not the most melodic techno. It's really designed to be groovy, danceable drum and percussion low end with interesting sound design with sounds from the future, as Jeff Mills likes to call it. So it's not about, I'm not making melodic techno. I'm not making, like trippy Tulum style Burning Man techno. That's not what I do. I like the stuff that is primal. It's rhythm driven. You can't help but dance to it. And then the sounds and the sound design architecture of it is all stuff that make it fun to listen to while you're dancing. But the whole idea is that it should be danceable, not necessarily trying to impress people with how many melodies I can interweave. So I like the sound design aspect of it and the drum and percussion aspect, and that's kind of what draws me to this style of techno. But yeah, do your thing, whatever you like to do. So let's see. Save your questions for NobCon. Okay, we can do that. It is a good setup for flying, I agree. Do you post these racks on Modular Grid? This one is up on Modular Grid right now. I think it's current. Yeah, I like to try to keep my most current one up there because people ask me all the time, but yeah. Double my performance setup then, 6U84, yep. Mixer skiff, yeah, so like you just hit the nail on the head of where the problem is. If you need a mixer skiff, then you probably need a mixer. Or a bigger rack, or scale things down and put your mixer in the rack. That's why for me, this is like, there's a functionality to what I designed here. So it's like, it's all mixing on the bottom. It's all drums and percussion here. Then it's voices and effects here. And I like to keep the voice with its filter, with its insert effect all together. So like some of them, they're in one module. So like the Ergoson's bassline, everything's in one. In the warp, everything's in one, but I also added a secondary filter just because I like it. It does have filter built in, but I like having this one with wave folding on the outside. So they're together. Polycinematic and Oxycoral both have their filters and effects built in. Then you have BIA with its filter and with its effect, all as one voice. Pizza with its filter, with its effect, all in one voice. So it's each one of them, it kind of acts as its own synth. And then this is all the drum machine, and then it's all mixing down here. And then sequencing outside the case, super important for me with the Oxy 1. And then this stuff over here is extra, and this kind of comes and goes in and out of my live setup. I still don't know if I'm gonna bring the Digitac 2 or not. There's times when I want it, there's times when I don't. I have it set up to be one-shot drum shots. So like, I don't know, like if I wanted to bring in a hi-hat, I've got hi-hats, I've got rides, I've got some tom things. different percussive stuff. But I don't know if I want to bring a whole box to do just that, because I can do a lot of that in the case, and I can do a lot of that with loops in the black box. The black box is basically set up to be all loops of different things. So like hats, rides, top loops, atmospheric stuff, percussion loops, and then rhythmic stuff, textures. And I have everything kind of built out, so it's always kind of the same convention. This is always a vocal. There's kind of a ravey stab if I want to do rave stab type stuff. And then random modular loops. And then something more mellow and dubby, just kind of depending on the mood. And every one of the presets that I have that I've built in here all sticks to that. So like track 1 is always a hat loop of some kind. Track 2 is always a ride loop of some kind. So again, if I'm missing something and I'm going along and I'm like, oh man, you know, I'm doing this thing. Let's say I'm doing this and I'm like, oh, I want percussion, and I'm already using my, let's say, let's say I'm already using this for something else, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I just want a percussion loop of some kind I can bring in. And I can bring these kind of atmospheric percussion stuff, or I can make, you know, my atmosphere stuff here. Oops. Using those send effects like we were talking about before. Or if I don't want to use the send effects to do that, I've got some atmosphere stuff in here. That I can just use as kind of background atmosphere, or I've got some textures. So again, I've got a lot of things that I can build with, pieces and parts. And then if I wanted to bring in one of those more kind of standard drum percussion sequences, that's what I have in the DTAC 2. So like if I wanted a 16th hat, I have that to bring in. If I want an open ride, I've got those that I can bring in just as things that I can always reach for. So it's more like kind of like the standards is what I have over in this stuff, kind of those foundational elements that I would reach for. Often I'll go 30, 40 minutes of a set and never touch anything on this side, and I'm only doing stuff in the modular. And then I'll be like, okay, I want to bring in this idea, and this will give me an idea of things that I can build on in the modular. So it's, I don't know, it's all kind of, it all is just set up as something that it spurs ideas, and then it allows me to kind of blow those ideas out into broader themes and tracks and stuff like that during the show. So that's how that is all set up. We have here, I've been reading about the Bohm, and oh my freaking God, it's incredible. It is. I mean, I have to say, I'm a huge fan of the battering ram, and I still am, and I still think it's the best kick as a pure kick. But the Bohm is a kick system that, you know, it's kick plus reverb or rumble, or however you want to use it, plus performance with two different types of effects, with sidechain, with all of that built in, with a whole bunch of different algorithms, tons of different kicks, lots of control over them. So yeah, it just does a lot. It's a whole system, but it takes up a ton of space in the rack. So if you've got a small rack, if you only have space for just a kick, go for the battering ram. If you really want to go for like the full suite of everything that you want, and particularly if you're making techno, like I don't think there's any other option out there that's like this good for techno. You could do all this stuff using the battering ram as your basis kick, but you would need a ton of other modules. It would take up just as much space, be way more expensive. So if you just want a pure kick, battering ram's the way to go. If you need the other stuff, sidechain, the rumble, different types of kick sounds, different multiple effects, then yeah, the Bohm it's pretty badass, I must say. They did a good job with it. Let's see, just invested in a Blue Box Eurorack. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, the Blue Box Eurorack it's a cool one. For me, it's a great mixer because especially if you're going to be recording, because you can record directly into it on SD card, you can export out, you can do all of that stuff, which is really great. The reason why I don't have that module is because for me, it's not hands-on. It's not a performance mixer. And for me, as you guys have seen throughout this thing, I'm using the mixer constantly. This is my main instrument. These are all pieces of it, but everything flows through the mixer and the sequencer. Like these two things are the main instrument, the main performance tool, the things that I'm touching the most during a show. I'm doing sound design in the modules and I'm adjusting those things, but really a lot of effect sends, different volume levels, bringing things in and out, changing up sequences. That's really where the bulk of the performance is happening. And so having a performance mixer that has, longer faders, that has really good effect send knobs. The board brain one as well, every channel is stereo. So I have basically in this amount of space, I have 12 stereo channels, each with 2 effect sends, each that can be split using this crossfade button to make the pan into a crossfader between 2 monos. So you can in effect have 24 mono channels or 12 stereo channels in this amount of space. So actually overhead, so you can see in this amount of space. So it's a lot of power, and the fact that the sound quality is so good and it's totally analog. Like the entire mixer, the entire signal path is analog all the way through, which is really, really interesting. And just the sound quality of it is amazing. So I love it. I'm a huge fan. But I think first and foremost, the biggest, most important plus for me about this is the playability. Like how it feels to play is for me the biggest thing, the top priority. All right, let's see where we at here. Gotta shoot. All right, take care. Blue Box with Novation Launchpad is okay-ish, but not perfect. But the recording option is really good. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan I love 1010 stuff. I mean, obviously I use the black box all the time. I'm not a big touchscreen guy, especially in like a hot, sweaty nightclub when I'm like sweat dripping off my fingers. It's not the easiest to use a touchscreen. So I kind of always have to have them with a MIDI controller, which is why I'm using this with the drop. Before I was using this with the Launch Control XL. The new XL Mark II looks awesome as well. I haven't used it yet, but it looks really cool. So having that for the black box or the blue box, I think is really, really important. So you can have some physical control. But then you're at the point where you're carrying extra gear. You've got a lot of stuff that you're bringing with you. So it just kind of depends on what are your priorities. But the recording aspect of the blue box is awesome. And I don't think there's anything else that does quite what it does in your rec format. I mean, you can do recording in your mixer if you get one of those Zoom L6, I think it is, does something similar as far as recording to SD card, but that's an external thing, and also not a performance mixer. So it's like you're not gonna, there's nothing out there that I've seen that does both, and I haven't seen anything out there that does like outboard performance mixer that's non-modular, and it's also not a big desktop mixer or a big DJ mixer. So anyway, we'll see. Octatrack comes closest, which is why people, I think, use the Octatrack for it so much. But anyway, let's see. Any other questions? What else do you guys have questions about? We can jump into a few more before we go. I'm going to have a little coffee here. As Bo says, a little sip of the coffee. Always important. But yeah, so it's, again, going back to the beginning, just to really quickly reiterate, this whole rig is made for live performance, right? This isn't made to write tracks and record them. I shouldn't say record, write tracks and save them to be able to be repeated. There's a couple modules in here that can save presets, like the Warp, the Oxy, Percon's Voice, and the Bohm can save presets. I think the Shockmots can both save presets as well, but I never have really on those. But I don't save presets on any of these things. I save them in kind of a layout so that I can play them live, but I'm not saving a preset to use. Like I have yet to save any presets on any of them. And even within the external gear with the Digitakt, I have not necessarily preset. I have preset sounds, samples on each one, and I know where they are. And a lot of them are set up as kind of basic fundamental patterns, but they're made to be sequenced live. And then the loops are, again, building blocks or things to kind of fill in the gaps of things that I either can't do or it's more difficult to do within the modular, so that I don't have to, because I've only got so much space, I can't build out a whole row just to be able to do, these percussion loops with effects and all that stuff. Much easier to do that in a sample box. So, but yeah, everything is made to perform within an improvised way. So you can kind of quickly build up stuff from nothing to make something that sounds, I think, okay. So let's see what else here. All right. Well, looks like a lot of people are signing off. I think we'll probably call it there. But I appreciate you all. If you want to jump in the course, like I said, now's the time to do it. Go to circlelive.com/courses. Sign up today. You get a discount, and it's going to be the last cohort of the course for a while. And so if you're on the fence about doing it, now's the time to sign up for the September course, either the improvised live performance course, where we kind of come up with, there's a whole system of how to build a rig like this, how to use it, how to practice, how to create your sound, come up with your signature sound, decide what you want to use for gear to make the kind of music that you want to make. So all of that is built into the course. How to gig, how to travel to gigs, how to get yourself more gigs, all of that stuff is built into the course as well. So if you're interested in potentially doing it, now is probably the time to sign up, because there is, like I said, it's going to be the last one for a little while. So definitely sign up now, circlelive.com/courses, and there'll be a discount code on there that will allow you to get 30% off right now. So definitely do that. Otherwise, I hope to see you at one of the gigs if you're out and about. Dayton, September 4th, Chicago, September 6th, Brooklyn, New York, September 20th, Berlin, October 16th, 17th, 18th, and ADE all week from the 22nd to 25th. I have a couple of gigs in there. Not 100% sure of the dates yet, so I will let you know. But check social media, follow me on Instagram, and you can kind of see everything on there as well. And yeah, hope this helped. And if you have any other questions, put them in the comments of the video, like the video, and pass it around to your friends so we can get some people to see it. And yeah, thanks very much. Hope you got something out of it, and hope to see you at one of the gigs. Thanks very much, and I will see you soon. Later.